Welcome back to part 5 of building a Ragebringer. Last week we got the guard and the pommel shaped, and this week we're going to affix them. We're going to peen them down so they never come off, and then we're going to get to work on building the wooden core that goes on the interior of the blade. Typically the final assembly is done by stacking all the components onto the blade. So the crossguard goes on, and then the grip, and then the pommel, and then the peen block is either riveted or bolted down. And each subsequent item holds down the previous item. For this dagger though, I want to assemble the wood and leather of the grip last. And to do that, each component needs to be individually mounted. The crossguard is first, and for that we're going to join it in two ways. The first way is we'll mix up some 2-part epoxy and apply that to the tang and also to the inside of the crossguard. Then you just slide the crossguard on and clean up your squeezed out epoxy. The primary means of securing it though is going to be chiseling down or peening down those shoulders that are just in front of that crossguard, and that'll mechanically secure it in place. The epoxy is really just an insurance policy. It's nearly impossible to hammer those shoulders down directly, so we need a chisel. Our chisel needs to be harder than the blade, so I took a piece of the same steel stock, ground it into the chisel shape, and then I hardened it in water. We're going to do this cold because we really don't need to move that metal very much at all, and also because we don't want to burn up that epoxy that we applied on the inside of the crossguard. The pommel is next, so we can finally cut off all that extra tang that's sticking out of the back of the knife. We really only need to leave about 1/4 to maybe 1/8 of an inch of that exposed. That's quite a bit of metal to move, so we're going to do this step hot. To do that, we'll wrap the blade in a rag and then saturate that with water. That will ensure that any heat that travels down the tang will always be below the boiling point of water. I should probably be a little more patient than I'm demonstrating here. Hammering on it this aggressively when it's this cold can cause small cracks to form. Here you can see one of those small cracks I was warning about. Fortunately, I was able to keep working that area and slowly blend that crack away so you can't see it. The hammer marks actually turned out pretty consistent, and I think they look pretty cool, so I'm going to clean these up with a wire brush and they will be in the final product. A quick once over with our 400 grit structured abrasive will clean those edges up nicely. Our pommel is also nice and oxidized from all that heat, so we'll take a minute to polish that up, and then we can move on to preparing the wooden core for the grip. Someone asked last week why the background noise was always so low, and I have to admit I was a little inexperienced in the way I set up the microphones while I was filming, and so for this next clip I'm going to turn that audio up so you can hear my Tony Soprano impression, and I think that should explain to anyone why the background noise is turned down a little bit. For the core of the grip, we want 2 pieces of wood that are slightly larger than the final dimensions of the handle. One of those pieces of wood needs to be a little thicker than the other by the thickness of the tang, and that'll make sense later. On the thicker piece, we will then trace out the shape of the tang, and then we'll set the table saw's blade height to be the same as the thickness of the tang, and then we can run that thicker piece in multiple passes over the blade to carve out the shape of the tang. This method does leave a pretty rough geometry, and you can kind of see the ridges here on the inside of that channel we made. So we'll just use a chisel to kind of clean that up a little bit. Here you can see why we left one side thicker. Once you put these on either side of the tang, it'll totally capture the tang in there. I did cut it just a little bit long, and that's because I wanted to take it to the belt sander and sand it into shape so that we could get a nice snug fit. We peened down the metal on the inside of the crossguard, so here I'm grinding off the inside corner of the grip so that it can accommodate that extra material. After a little cleanup with some hand sanding and a chisel, the grip now fits snug around the tang.
Well, it is definitely starting to look like a dagger now. So hit the subscription button, the notification bell, and check back next week. We're going to start on wrapping the handle. Bye.